Pronunciation there, Nemo. That was nice.
Thanks, James.
That was nice, right? I was not going to get that one. Yeah, not at all. But, of course, so we're excited to play here as we see Firouzja and Wei Yi ready. And they also bring sometimes their own mice or their own keyboards or whatever makes them feel very comfortable there. So we are excited to play here. Any last words here before we bring the casters in, Bach and Nemo?
I do want to say that we were perhaps snooping a little bit on Alireza over there. He was doing some puzzle rush for warm-up.
That's how he warms up.
Yeah, whereas Wei Yi was kind of just chilling. He was just like, you know, just sitting there.
Chill, locked in. He always looks like that too, just vicious, locked in. But of course, sometimes he does show emotion on faces. I've seen him shake his head before and etc. Just understanding that it may not be his position. Bach, any last words?
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting one. I think Firouzja is the favorite, but Wei Yi is capable of beating anyone, so we'll see what will happen.
Absolutely. We will see what happens. We'll be watching from the back room on our end. But in the meantime, thanks to our analysts here, as we are going to bring in our casters that are going to call all of the action here. Firouzja ready to go. Wei Yi, his opponent there on the other side, of course, as they are going to be ready. Firouzja and Wei Yi. Let's bring on the casters here. We have ourselves Grandmaster Amon Hamilton and Grandmaster Eric Hansen calling all of the action. Let's go, boys.
Thank you, James. Yeah, let's go indeed. And Eric, you know, I kind of had this match on my short list of matches that would be the most entertaining from this initial round. Alireza Firouzja and Wei Yi.
Definitely Alireza, I think everyone's very familiar with. Wei Yi as well. He's been at the top for a long time. He likes tactics, he likes calculation. I mean, I think people have noticed in this time format, the games end up exciting one way or another. The clock puts so much pressure on the players on the games that you're pretty much guaranteed at some point there's going to be fireworks.
Yeah, 100%. Alireza Firouzja against Wei Yi. This is an interesting matchup because Wei Yi is someone that, you know, maybe the larger audience might not know too much about, but this is a chess prodigy, right? He's one of the most talented players to come out of China, and he's here representing Weibo Gaming. I'm excited to see some fireworks between these two, but Eric, this initial position, kind of surprising. This looks very mellow, a bit more solid than I was expecting.
Yeah, Alireza, well, you see that heart rate there. He's, I don't know, he's maybe a little bit nervous. I don't read too much into that, but it is solid. But you know what? I think the idea of playing a long game, with lots of pieces on the board, I think the players are realizing that's a good strategy. Well, you don't need to allow too many forcing moves. Wei Yi is a very, very well prepared player, and we have a position that, okay, might not give white the most winning chances with the queens off, but there's play, there's ideas of grabbing space, and Alireza, we know his ability in time scrambles and whatnot, that he would probably be pretty comfortable playing a shortened format against someone like Wei Yi.
Yeah, completely agree. I'm looking at this position. I like to move bishop to f4. Normally what white does is they want to play b4. So the pawn moves up to b4, and then maybe the knight from f3 can drop back to d2, maybe over to b3, and even out to the a5 square. But in order to attack that b7 pawn for black, it helps to control the b8 square. So I like bishop f4 to start, and the moves that I would be looking at next are probably b4, e3, knight d2, knight b3, knight a5.
Yeah, if white gets everything they want, I mean, that is how they play, b4, knight b3, knight a5. Black often has to react. I mean, you can play a6 as black and just try to play solid, but the alternative, try to strike in the center. Maybe that knight on f6 moves to e4. Maybe after that, the pawn on f7 can go up to f5. Black needs to come up with some active counterplay, or you can play very passive. I don't really recommend that for the time format, just giving your opponent a bit of a space advantage and some ideas. And knowing Wei Yi, he's a concrete player. I think he's going to try to play in the middle, try to figure out how can I delay this plan or get Alireza thinking. Is there any way for me to make e5 work in some position? It's not happening yet, but at some point, maybe get the rook on e8, tuck the bishop in. White's job, contain e5. Once you contain e5, you can look towards this knight d2, knight b3 idea. But even if you don't play knight d2, knight b3 right away, it's lingering. It can happen later in the game. I want to make sure black doesn't come back in the center first.
Yeah, and this is a good point. You mentioned knight e4. Playing it now makes a lot of sense. Before, the move knight d2 is played, because if you played knight d2 now, that knight's never making it to b3 and a5. You can exchange it off. And also, if you capture the knight in the middle, the bishop can recapture. All of a sudden, the bishop is happy to potentially take on f3, and knight d2 is prevented due to the pin once again. So knight e4 prevents all those plans that we were talking about for Alireza.
And speaking about the structure, white wants to keep at least one knight on the board. When you have this semi-open A file, you have the double B pawns, black often will play a6 at some point. a6 not being played here, Wei Yi's playing very aggressively. I'm not used to seeing b6, by the way. Actually, wow.
The computer agrees. Eric, I'm as shocked as you. This move is not standard for this structure. The more common a6 was the solid approach, moving the other pawn and keeping that pawn chain, right, all connected to one another. This is very provocative and potentially just, you know, an error. Is it too early to call it that?
I don't think so. I think Wei Yi could have just taken on c3 even, and played bishop e4 and then a6, and even that position looks pretty hard to break through for white. But b6, the reason it's often not played is when the timing is right, sometimes white can play the move b5 right now. Maybe not here, but the idea of b5 is to provoke black to take on b5 with the pawn and push c6 with the c5 pawn. He's not going for that. I don't know if the players, again, I haven't calculated too much there, but that's often the way to punish b6, and maybe it doesn't work. g5.
And one of the things about Alireza and Wei Yi, I know them to be very dynamic, you know, players, very tactical. So b6 actually suits Wei Yi. I wonder if he's going to follow up with a5. Pure chaos on the board on the queen side. That's usually pretty tough to meet, especially as an important detail. White is not castled, so the rooks are not defending one another. I think a5, I mean, it could be tough to react to. You mentioned the move b5. It might be that.
a5 is the move to look for. When you play b6, you want to destabilize this pawn chain. You need it a5 as well. a5 coming. That will force Alireza to come up with something big. If he doesn't play a5, it means there's something he doesn't like. It's usually this b5 move. I'm not sure about taking on g5 because that does bring the rook into play. On the other hand, that bishop on h7, if it ever gets harassed, can probably move over to f5.
Yeah, the bishop on h7 is definitely happier after this move. And the question is, are we going to see that a5 move get played? No, rook over to c8. I mean, he's definitely investing a lot on the queen side here. If he doesn't play a5, Eric, I think the position is just going to be bad. Notice how if black captures on c5 with the pawn, you can't play rook to b8 as black because the white bishop on f4. And rook a6 is a fantastic move to just illustrate that, because now if you don't get a5, I'm really nervous about the whole b6 idea.
Yeah, if you don't get an a5, then you have to watch over b6. You can't afford to lose b6 in a lot of lines. And rook a6, not only does it stop a5, but in the future, Alireza would like to maybe castle and swing another rook on the a file, and it's extremely hard to defend the a7 pawn. So the last couple of moves, I mean, don't quite understand the idea of b6 without following it up with something aggressive.
That's right. Yep. And at this point, pawn takes on b6 is threatened, so the only idea is to kind of bring the knight to b8 and then bring it back. But the issue, Eric, is you can castle here, and notice Alireza played rook a2. He's making space already for rook now on f1 to go to a1. So if you come with a5, as was probably a good move a couple moves ago, it doesn't work the same way. Rook over to a1 pins the pawn to the rook on a8. Wei Yi might be in serious trouble here.
No, the last thing you want to do, he's down on time, and white does have an initiative now. Rook a1 is coming. When you play b6, yeah, you don't want to take on c5. That did not improve the position for black. If anything, it just undoubles white's pawns. That's a plus for Alireza. This is a critical junction here for Wei Yi. The initiative is coming. Alireza is not a guy you want to play from behind against. And, well, I'm just a little confused. The Wei Yi's such a solid player. b6 is not even... I mean, he can play tactical when the position requires it, but b6 just feels like it's neither.
It was unprovoked as well. He didn't have to do it. Wasn't necessary. You know, this feels like a bit of an unforced error. Why b6 when a6 was so solid and available? This might suit his style, but then I'm critical of perhaps the move rook c8, a bit slow when maybe a5 would have kept things going. So One way or another, it's worked out in a position that I think Alireza is really enjoying. He knows that the b8 square is covered by the bishop, never worried about it opening up. He has an easy next move, rook f to a1. He can count on that, Eric, against just about anything from his opponent.
Yeah, the moves come too easy, and that's a big factor. When players get low on time, sometimes it's like, well, the position was objectively okay, but one side had a plan. They had an easier to play position. Here, White has an easier to play position, has a plan. Wei doesn't have anything. He's got to decide, okay, you played knight e4, but you just leave it there. What other piece can he improve now? What can he do with his impeding rook a1 idea? I thought he was going to fight more directly in the center. That's not happening. I really don't like his decision making right now. f6 is played at least.
Yeah, that covers the e5 square. One thing I was thinking about rook to a1. When it happens, I think that Wei Yi might try to play a5 anyway. I mean, you don't want to allow rook to a1, and then White just takes on a7. The knight on d7 would be hanging, the bishop hanging behind it. That's very, very scary. So I'm thinking he wants to play a5. Hopefully, Alireza takes it, and then he can take the other pawn on c5 and really shake things up. I think that he wants a position that is more open and imbalanced, and we can tell he's looking for an imbalance based on that move. Might not be the best move, Eric, but he's looking for something because he doesn't want to just lose a pawn for nothing.
No, he had to go for something. This is one of the ideas. It's a little slow because Wei Yi committed his rooks c8. The rook is stuck on a8. It would be nice to have that rook on e8 maybe supporting the e5 push. Right now, the timing doesn't work. Alireza has everything covered. a7, that threat, it's finally here.
It's completely hanging,
and just going down a pawn. It's not just going down a pawn. That'll also grant White the a file. With that a file, you get a rook on a7. You start harassing the 7th rank. You can also start attacking the weak pawns of Black, which are on c6 and e6. It's just a one-way street, plus a pawn up.
Yep.
Things are looking very
I'm looking
good.
at the time as well. 2-minute time edge. That's reflective of the position, right? This is a difficult position for Wei Yi to be in. He doesn't have an e5 break. He's losing the a7 pawn on the next move. It's tough to even find a way to play. I'm starting to get desperate. I'm looking at g5, g4 to try to destabilize the d4 pawn. He's gone for the move that I was calling out earlier, but I mean, it's just a mistake at this point. You can grab pawns. Alireza is not even blinking. He says, thanks very much for the extra pawn.
Thanks very much for the extra pawn, and maybe thank you for the passed pawn. He can take b takes a5, push that pawn up, probably to a6 if necessary. He doesn't have to, but that's just an outside passed pawn for Alireza. And the time advantage is severe right now. Wei Yi in big, big trouble. What can he stir up here? He's got that bishop on h7, bishop on f6. They'd like to join the game. They're okay right now, but he needs more than that. He needs to make up the deficit. He needs to create counterplay. With knight
c5?
d7.
I mean, is that the only idea, Eric? Pawn to c5, trying to, you know, destabilize that d4 pawn. Maybe put some pressure on the c3 knight. It basically looks like the only pawn move available. I've mentioned the move g5 earlier. I still don't mind it, right? g5 and g4 is an idea, but it just, nothing feels quick enough.
Nothing feels quick enough. Alireza going for an exchange. Maybe he plays e3 and just gets ready to bring the knight around. I wonder when he's going to play a6. I wonder if he's ever going to try to play a6, a7. I don't think you need to do it yet. But he needs to do something here, because at least Wei Yi now is threatening something. He's starting to take the knight on f3, take on d4, you know, get that bishop in the game. So there is a bit of a decision to be made for White. Can you play knight e5? Do you really want to trade that? Not so sure.
Yeah, there's also still this g5, g4 idea just to hit both of the pieces. c5 is available. You know, there is a possibility, Eric, that these rooks on a2 and a1 can feel a bit clumsy in a way. They're both supporting the a-pawn, but Black, you know, only has to commit one rook, the rook on a8, to cover that. Instead, the rook on c8 after c5 can go for a lot of counterplay. So if you're not careful as Alireza, the rooks can feel a little offside.
They can feel offside, and you don't want to be in a situation where you've committed everything to the a-pawn, but you don't have any pieces ready to kick away the rook on a8. How is Alireza, if you were to push that pawn or leverage it, how can he actually remove the bishop on a8? You'd like to get your light squared bishop in the game. Not easy. Look at Black. He's got pawns on c6, d5. That diagonal is very hard to contest. So if you're not doing that, maybe I'm looking at exchanges and trying to play with limited material on the board, just to at least take away even some of the risk that he overplays his hand. So I'm looking at e3. b4, that is a very interesting move. He's sacrificing a pawn, but he's got the bishop pair.
That tells me, Eric, that he might have been concerned about some of the things we were talking about. The c5 move for black. Also the rooks being, too far to the side and not in the action. He solved both of those problems, but obviously it costed him a full pawn to do so.
Not just the pawn, the bishop on d4 is in the game, so it definitely breathes life into Weiyi's position. And the question for Alireza is, he's not up material anymore. What he needs is to activate the bishops. How can he get that bishop, that light squared bishop, that's the bishop that black doesn't have. Look at all the weak pawns for black. e6, c6. How can we get the bishop on g2 into the game, make an impact?
Yeah, bishop back to g2. Initially, after bishop g2, I was thinking, oh, the knight should just jump into c4, a nice routine move, but we see a lot of thought put into this move by Weiyi. I wonder if he's thinking about knight g6 or even knight back to d7, but remember, the rook on a2 is swinging over to c2 next, putting pressure on the c6 pawn. I thought that knight c4 was going to be an automatic move here.
Well, knight c4, I'm wondering, he's worried about rook c2 anyways, and the exchange sacrifice.
Right.
Knight c4, rook a to c2, and Alireza might be willing to give up that exchange to open up the bishop, pick up more material, and I don't think he'd be risking anything there. I don't think that's a easy defensive task where he's spent time and decided to play it anyways, but I'm really looking at it. I think it should be played.
Yep, and you can throw in the move e3 ahead of time and then bring the rook over. All of that works out the exact same. Those two pawns on b4 and a5 for white, plus the two bishops barreling down on the a8 and b8 squares on the long diagonals, that is more than enough compensation. White definitely has an edge here. It's reflected on the clock as well.
Yeah, those are the worst positions to play when you're down in time because white sacrificed material. Those bishops are hard to get to. So Weiyi will just be permanently defending, and he won't be able to trade off pieces. He can trade off that bishop on g2 with his rooks. I mean, it's just too long ranged. He's shuffling the knight around now, but this is getting worse and worse. Alireza is making progress.
Notice how he's not taking on e5. He's not looking to enter a position with opposite colored bishops. Once again, we saw it in the previous match, Eric. He's maintaining the bishop pair.
And there's no reason to give easy decisions, easy moves. You take on e5, not only is it opposite bishops, but it just gives black an easy move. I'm going to recapture. Keep the tension, keep the pressure, keep the tough decisions, target the c6 pawn, just maintain, nurture that time advantage.
He would love to play the move b5. He plays rook over to c2. I think he may have underestimated this move. Will he actually take on e5 now? It doesn't look good. He's dropping the b pawn. All of a sudden, Weiyi's kind of coming to life a little bit.
Yeah, if Weiyi can get opposite bishops, get some dark squares going, that is counterplay. I mean, the a pawn on a6, it looks good, but white has shifted the pieces in a way that you can't push it anymore.
Yep, this is starting to become a very dynamic position. In fact, we might see the move. Oh, he actually decides to take. Okay, I think he did not like the look of his position, and Weiyi playing very quickly. He anticipated that entire line.
Wow. He can try to play on the dark squares. Black can go for the dark squared blockade, and now white has no more pieces to contest that.
Yeah, rook e7 can be played here. You don't have to trade, and he does so. The black rook can also go to a4. Keep in mind the time here, Eric, but I think Weiyi is going to be playing with some big momentum.
You know that I played Weiyi in Bullet, in the past year, and he's actually quite strong there. So not to be underestimated if he gets really low. At the same time, you don't want to play a Bullet position against Alireza down 15 seconds. So if you're Weiyi, stabilize, play faster, make up a bit of time. Opposite bishops, really unfortunate in time trouble.
That's right, and I mean, we're talking about Alireza Firouzja,
that's a big find,
Team Falcons. He just played the best move in the position. He is the current Bullet chess champion, and that is 1 minute chess. That's exactly what we're playing.
He's going for e5 Amon. He's trying to lock out the bishop. If you play d3, he's still going e5 potentially.
Yep, he wants to play e5, bishop coming to c4. Also, after e5, there's even f5 as well with bishop c4.
That bishop is running out of space on f6. If black allows e5, that bishop has nowhere to go but h4. That's not a good square.
Yep, c4 is screaming for that bishop.
You want bishop c4, king g4 for rook f2 check. This is looking worse and worse. One bishop's dominating the other.
Yep, and there is pawn to f5 as well. Of course, pawn to e5, but pawn to f5 wins that
It's a check, though. Do you play king g4? Do you go further down the board? Is he confident in his calculation? I think so.
Watch out, king g4, rook g3 check, king takes h4, rook g1. He might be nervous about potential checkmate threats. Otherwise, why not play king g4?
He's nervous, but I think he's going for it. What are we missing? March the king up, prepare your f5 move, and there it is. But he's lost his time advantage.
Okay, there's bishop e1. Rook g3 is an absolutely huge move in the position. And wait, rook g3, is it possible here? He's playing the move f5 next.
Wait, he's going for a check. The king has a good square. And what a find him on, g5.
Yep, he's actually finding a way to defend it. But you know what's funny? The pawn on a6. Did he forget about it? Because he found a way to save material, but the a-pawn.
Yeah, that rook is pinned, and there's almost no way to stop it. King takes g6. Do you push a7 here? Probably not. You might be worried about checkmate. Alireza here doesn't need to do that. His win condition on the board and on the clock. He's up 10 seconds. Now he's forcing the bishop back. The conversion is coming.
I wonder if you could play
that's
d3.
the blunder. That's the blunder.
Oh my
there goes
goodness.
the bishop down to 16 seconds and a resignation.
Alireza Firouzja, Team Falcons, gets the victory over Wei Yi in game number 1. Eric, that was incredible to watch. The blunder at the end, two of the best players low on time, but Alireza Firouzja, it did feel like a very methodical game from him after that b6 move from Wei Yi earlier.
Once he had the initiative, he never let go. I mean, there's never a position where we liked Wei Yi's position.
Right.
And based on the clock as well, he was never really fully in the game. Not a position you want to be in. So I thought in terms of game planning and how things played out, Wei Yi's got to be disappointed with that b6 move because that's all it takes. I think that one move dictated this game.
Yeah, it sounds crazy to say that, but that's exactly right. That b6 move, if it was a6 instead, that would have been much different.
Yeah, a-pawn won the game for Alireza.
Yeah, that's a position that, you know, the players have seen before, played before. It's been explored. It's kind of confusing why he went for that b6. You know, maybe he wanted a more dynamic game, but against Alireza Firouzja, wouldn't recommend it. And it looks like we are getting set for the second game. You know, the players, they're ready to go, Eric. It's the type of thing that after a game like that, you just want to hit the rematch button and get things going.
Yeah, shocking, I would say, for Wei Yi. Not very characteristic for him to just give Alireza such an easy game plan and initiative. Now, with the white pieces, though, Wei Yi is very dangerous. He's very well prepared, theoretician, especially e4, e5. He has so much experience there because his opponents, I mean, even in China, most of the top Chinese players are e5 players. So he spends a lot of time looking at this and figuring out what can I do to make my opponent uncomfortable. It's not all about like finding the most theoretically challenging moves, but he's got ideas. He needs it against Alireza here because this is a must-win game. Game 2, Alireza Firouzja playing black against Wei Yi, only needing a draw.
That's exactly right. And we've actually seen this now in every single match, Eric. We saw the comeback, right? We saw an Armageddon in an earlier match. Is it going to happen here? But there's something about these elite players under pressure. We've always seen the player that needs to win on demand. We've actually seen them have great chances to do so. So I commend all the players that lose the first game. They've all managed to come back and generate something. So let's see if Wei Yi can sort of follow the footsteps. And he's got the white pieces here.
He's got the white pieces, and in these positions that are somewhat symmetrical, white wants to gain a bit of space. That often comes in the form of pawn to d4 at the right time. But before that, maybe you play h3. Sometimes you play a4. Do you take on b6? Generally not. Black is comfortable with the structure after a takes b6. However, if black ever pushes that a7 pawn, then you might take on b6, pulling that c pawn towards the queen side, having one less pawn in the center for black. So Wei Yi, he's going to take his time, try to make some useful moves. But once those run out, it's up to him to imbalance the position and put pressure on Alireza.
Yeah, we see slow moves here, h3. He's just getting a feel for how Alireza is going to play the position. Curiously, we haven't seen the move d6 yet from Alireza, a standard move in order to get the bishop developed, but he's delaying it for a reason here. And because he just played the move rook e8, it almost makes me wonder, is he maybe intending knight a5 because the e-pawn is defended there? No, he just goes right back into sort of standard stuff with d6.
Well, now knight a5 might be an idea. And so I wonder if a3 or a4 is going to be played. a3 fairly common as well, but the decision.
Okay, captures first. He could include it now, right? a3, a4. Instead, pawn to d4. He's opening the center, but at the expense of a lot of trades.
A lot of trades. Normally, black is okay with this. Wei has an idea. I mean, those doubled B pawns aren't the worst. If you can keep them there, at least that's something for white to play against.
Dan, Alireza very quickly, by the way, responds with bishop to d7. Now, it seems unusual. For example, why would you allow white to play d5, attacking the knight, gaining more space? But that actually blocks the bishop on c4 for white completely. So you don't want to, put that pawn right in front of your bishop and totally ruin its scope. As soon as you play d5, black just reshuffles the knight, knight e7, knight g6. So we might see this tension in the center between the d4 and e5 pawns stay there for a while.
With this a4 move, I was saying, if you're going to double the pawns, a4 is a normal follow-up. You don't want to let those doubled b pawns expand. If black had a bunch of time, probably would reroute that knight on c6 to g6 and try to push that b6 pawn up to b5, whether it's supported by c6 and b5 or if you can get b5 right away. The point of a4 is to freeze the pawn on b6, and there's going to be certain positions that put a bit of pressure on black. You want to, like for example, if black ever moves the knight on c6 and he wants to push that pawn on c7, when that pawn pushes, then all of a sudden that b6 pawn will be a little loose. These are some long-term strategic goals. The position is okay for black, but Wei has an idea. When I see a4, it means, you know what, he's looking towards a long game. He doesn't mind playing an end game. And in some position, he'll have the argument that things are pretty balanced, but I have a bit of a better structure on the queen side. I'm going to try to push that.
Okay, queen to c8 has just been played by Alireza, right? a4 feels like one of those slow, methodical moves, playing against the pawn structure. Queen c8, you actually have to respect the idea of bishop takes h3. And white's move rook e3, it looks like it's taking care of that, right? You don't want to sacrifice on h3 now, but let's be honest, that was a real consideration for Alireza.
Yeah, when you win that pawn on h3 or sack, there's perpetual ideas. You have the attack, but also sometimes a perpetual. Rook e3, I like. What does white want? He wants black to take on d4. If you take on d4, then that knight on f3 jumps to d4. Then you see that rook on e3. It has mobility. It can go to g3. The queen on d1 would love to be centralized on a place like d4. Alireza is certainly not going to take on d4 unless he's forced to.
Right.
So now, again, a lot of tension in the middle, up to Wei to continue to develop his pieces and find useful moves until Alireza is at a point where maybe he runs out of squares and he has to take on d4, but it's up to Wei to figure that out. Sometimes you can play b3 here, sometimes queen d2. Rook a5 is an interesting move. That maybe there's some future where Alireza says, you know what, I will take on d4, but the reason is I want that rook on a5 to swing over to g5 and put pressure on the g2 pawn.
Yeah, kind of meeting Wei Yi's idea with the idea of his own. Rook e3 intends maybe rook g3 in the future. Well, rook a5 over to g5. Maybe black will actually get there first. And remember, rook on g5 pins the g2 pawn in front of white's king, which means that bishop captures h3. It's not just a sacrifice. It actually wins material. So you have to be a little afraid of those ideas. And also, if Wei Yi ever captures on e5 here, you're not just exchanging pawn for, pawn on d4 for the pawn on e5. If you take back with the d pawn, you're trading the d4 pawn for the d6 pawn. And it's not always a trade that you want to do. Bishop b5, Eric, locking that rook out and preventing the lateral idea that we were just discussing.
Yeah, preventing that lateral idea and just prolonging the game. Like, when you play a move like bishop b5, it's not evident right away, but if he ever needs to really imbalance, maybe there's some future where he does give that bishop for that knight. Maybe there's some future where Wei Yi tries to play rook b1 and b4 now that the rook is locked. No matter what, he wants to keep the tension in the middle, doesn't want to push that d4 pawn to d5 yet. He really, really, really wants black to play e takes d4, and he's going to wait and wait and wait as long as possible.
And it looks easier for Wei Yi to wait because he's got that little bit more space. You see the cramped position for black. Knight on c6, bishop d7, queen c8. White's position, you can play queen d2, queen d3, slide the rook on a1 over, play b3 to stabilize. Feels like there's a lot of small, useful moves, and that's why you see knight b4, a more committal move. You want to, get those bishops exchanged. You want some clarity in the position because I think it favors white to just keep the tension and keep things going.
I think it does for sure. Knight b4, I like that move. Wei probably doesn't want to take on d7. Every single time there's an exchange, Wei wants the benefit or have an imbalance as a result. So unless there's a good argument to be made, he's not going to go for any easy trades. Queen d2, good move. The queen might target the knight on b4 in the future. As you mentioned, it allows the rook on a1 maybe to join the game. And maybe in some position, if the rook on e3 ever gets to g3, all of a sudden you'll see that queen on h6, sorry, queen on d2 targeting the h6 pawn.
That's right.
A few useful moves here.
Bishop goes all the way back to f1. This is a standard move, I think, for the top players, but a lot of people look at that move and say, why would you put the bishop all the way back when there's other squares like c4 and e2 available?
So I have to say, c6 is a committal move by Alireza. If he does not play b5 or free things up, he's taken away also an escape square for the knight on b4. Yep. Like, let's say white just moves the rook on a1 to e1 or d1. In some future position, I'm going to go b3 as white to defend a4. Then my knight on c3 is able to move because it doesn't need to defend a4. And then that knight on b4 is looking really loose. I never want to have to play c5 as black to defend that knight. That weakens the b5 square permanently. And do I really want to put my knight on a6? Where is it going?
Well, I'm getting desperate, Eric. I actually might play pawn on e5, takes on d4. Reason number one, my rook on a5, if it doesn't ever jump across the board, I start to wonder what it's doing on a5. But also, if the pawn on d4 is gone, then I can maybe drop the knight to a6. And you were just saying, where does that knight go? Now it has the c5 square.
Yeah, something very concrete from Alireza. If d5 works, that's a huge accomplishment because once you play d5, you're chipping away at white's center. And if you can take on e4, that knight on b4 I was talking about, it can slide over to a nice centralized square on d5. Also, that rook on a5, once the d5 pawn captures e4, has mobility. It can slide over to e5 or g5. This is a way to activate Alireza's position. It's a push for equality and a big, big decision for Wei right now because this is not what he wanted.
No, this is a move that you do not want your opponent to achieve. Right? Every single piece in black's position is kind of ready for this move. The knight on b4 and f6, they both control and protect the d5 pawn. Even the rook on a5 is participating here. So without that move, I think Wei Yi was expecting to have just a very comfortable position with no breaks. But d5, Eric, I think Alireza has picked the exact right time to strike. He's up on time because Wei Yi is wondering, how do I react to this? Not just in order to play the best move, but also he needs to keep winning chances, right? I can see a future, Eric, where all the pieces just trade off on the open E file and open D file. Wei Yi cannot afford to let that happen.
Well, that's being threatened right now, and I have to say the rook to d1 move looks like a mistake. Wei Yi should have played rook a1 because he has to anticipate that Alireza is looking to equalize, looking to dissolve the center, but only under the right circumstances. He's placed his pieces in a way, Wei Yi, that this works for Alireza. This move looks like it's really pushing to remove all attention and equalize. If he had his rook on e1, the d1 rook on e1, he'd have the move pawn to e5.
Yes.
And things would be completely different.
That's really a miss, a move he'll look back on, but hopefully not something he's looking back on now because you have to focus on the task at hand. As I keep saying, taking on d5, it only serves to just trade everything at this point. Eric, I'd be happy to just play rook a8. We don't need to be fancy anymore with the rook on a5. Now the center is going to be wide open. That rook belongs back on d8, right in the center of the board, aimed at white's queen. There's no e5 move. I think we might have to just take on d5, but also the white knight, if we capture on d5, the a pawn is going to be weak as well.
Yeah, that a pawn is weak. I'm not happy with my knight on b3. It was better in the center. I'd rather defend a4 with the pawn. I don't want to have to defend with a knight. This is another way you playing rook a, like rook to e1. I like that because he's realized he can't do anything about it. He just has to play fast at this stage.
Yep, and I mean, you have to just capture this. He's down more than a minute and a half. Trades are happening here. I'm concerned about the a4 pawn, but something we talked about earlier is finally coming to light. The b4 knight is hit by the queen, and that's why we see knight to d5. I'm sure that he's going to take on f6 in order to remove that black knight from the center of the board, but look at the a pawn for white. It is under attack right now, and most importantly, Eric, there's lots of trades. Every rook might disappear on the e-file right now. This is becoming a position where Alireza has phenomenal drawing chances, and that will win him this match.
Really good drawing chances. The only imbalance after these exchanges is on the queen side, those doubled b-pawns. So I think Wei Yi's looking to centralize his knight, move it out of the way, play b3, at some point get a queen on d4, e3, just to look. Well, I said that and he didn't play it. But I'm not so sure about this decision. It makes a bit of sense if you can get your knight on b3 to a5. But at the expense is we did get rid of those doubled pawns.
Yeah, there's just not much of an advantage to speak of here. You can see the evaluation bar right in the middle of the board. This is just an equal position with a 2-minute time advantage for Alireza Firouzja and draw odds because Wei Yi needs to win.
Yeah, he needs a plan here. Maybe he's playing queen e3 hoping for a blunder. You can't take on c4. The knight on e8 is loose. But Alireza, he's not going to miss something like that. It's just a decision. Does he play c5? And he's played it. He's got a light squared bishop. His pawn's on dark squares. One of the only chances I can see is even in imbalance, queen and bishop. If Alireza ever gives up his bishop for the knight, it's still going to be relatively equal, but at least there's going to be a queen and bishop versus queen and knight. Pawns on both sides of the board, some sort of small idea. I don't think it's enough.
I was thinking, okay, he plays knight f6. I was thinking about knight d6 there to try to trade knights, and I thought there was a possibility we might see what you were talking about. No, the king is on h7. I actually think that we're very close to a situation where Alireza just might even have the easier position to play. Queen f8. Eric, last attempt, because if that black king moved over one square to g7, I think we would have been completely solid.
Yeah, king g7 would have been ideal. King is super safe. It controls everything here. A little bit annoying, you know.
Yep.
The king can't move. There's some positions where the knight on f6 can be loose. Where he's probably planning on rerunning that knight on c4 to e3 or somewhere towards the center. I just don't see the plan. I don't see the coordination where the queen on f8 can coordinate with one of white's other pieces to come up with an idea or an initiative. At the same time, he's playing quickly. Alireza slowing down a little bit. Sometimes that happens. You equalize, you slow down, you get comfortable, and then you start misplaying. We've seen a few players grind equal positions. Here, I don't know, I guess his idea, boot the king off, and then is it going to be king g7? Queen f4 first. That's a nice find from Alireza. Right now we have a draw being threatened with queen c1 check. That's at least a repetition, at least, and a big decision for Wei Yi. How can he prolong the game?
Yeah, he might need to drop the knight back, like knight e3. Really good coordination by Alireza. Knight d7 guards the b pawn, also kick the queen out of f8, and queen f4. You can also drop back to you know, f6 if the position depends.
Knight d3, queen f6.
Yeah, there it is, and that hits the b2 pawn as well.
That's queen f6 is a huge move here, and what is there to do?
I like that.
Black is incredibly solid. He finds it, and chances are diminishing for Wei Yi. Alireza has found the setup. His king is safe.
This trades. This is exactly what Alireza wants. Realistically, Eric, he should not lose this position.
He really shouldn't in any sort of metric on the clock. Wei Yi seems to have a style where when it's really equal, he'll just trade and admit it's a draw. You know, he won't even like go for it, even though technically a draw and a loss are the same result. So you might as well sack the pawn.
Yep. No, he just goes straight to the endgame, and you'll see both players rush their kings to the middle. As soon as the queens disappear, it's safe for the king to enter, but there's so many win conditions here. You know, you question yourself about knight e5, but probably king e6 is safer.
King e6 is safe. At the right moment, you might play b5, but maybe just bring the king to c6. Both kings supporting the pawn. Don't see any idea. Now there's not even knight a3 because of b4 check, and it's getting closer and closer.
The king is centralized. I mean, if anything, you might even say black is, you know, playing for something here. But all Alireza needs is a draw. Knight c4 check comes to mind. But again, you don't want to take that risk if you don't have to. After knight takes c4, I don't think I would play that.
Yeah, he doesn't have to do it. Right now, if things continue, Wei Yi's just going to lose on time.
Exactly right. Knight endgames are so tricky as well because you think about other endgames, bishops and rooks, there's clear weaknesses and things you can target. And you mentioned it, Eric, he just doesn't really put that foot forward when he needs a win. It's a draw by repetition, which means that Alireza Firouzja and Team Falcons take the match victory.
Yeah, Wei Yi not able to put Alireza under any pressure once that d5 pawn was moved, and a comfortable match win, I would say.
I think so. In both games, I think he was under control. Maybe some small moments in this one early on, but he had an idea. He was looking for that moment to make d5 happen, break the center. As soon as that was played, he never looked back.
Moments in both games. Wei Yi allowing Alireza to equalize. He never had another chance. First game, Wei Yi plays b6. White had control for the entire game. So I just say, like, based on how Wei Yi played that match, just not sharp enough. Just missed some opportunities.
Yeah, in some ways, Eric, I'm wondering, do you think that was perhaps the most dominant performance of the matches that we've seen? Because we've seen a 2-0, but ultimately